everyone, and welcome to another episode of DMV Confidential. I'm Kenzie Chase.
And I'm Jenny Gable.
And today, like always, we have a brand new episode for you. So the story we want to talk to you guys about today is actually a national story that has DC ties. So it's about a 39-year-old woman whose body was never found after she went missing in January 2023, shortly after a New Year's Eve dinner. So the story we want to talk to you guys about today is about the murder of Ana Walshe.
Yeah, Kenzie. So as you said, 39-year-old Ana, she was a DC real estate agent, but she actually lived in the Boston area of Massachusetts with her family. And she was actually last seen early January 1st, 2023, after a New Year's Eve dinner that she had at her home with her husband, Brian, and a friend.
Yeah, so Jenny, this is actually a pretty big story. I'm sure people that are crime junkies that love this kind of stuff. I'm sure people have heard of this case. It's and we'll get into the big name that it's been known by, but it's a pretty big case in the Massachusetts area. So I wanted to talk about it, and I thought we would talk about it today because it has a DC tie. Mm-hmm. She was a DC realtor that went missing, and her body was never found.
Yeah, I think the part that struck me about this case was that they never found her body, because I feel like in a lot of the cases I know that we've talked about on this show, they typically have found the people that were victims of these crimes. So the fact that, it's been 3 years at this point and they still haven't found her definitely sticks out.
Right, but that doesn't stop investigators from actually doing digging. And pretty early on, they're able to sort of pin a suspect. So evidence from early surveillance shows that a man that resembled her husband, Brian Walshe, was throwing away what appeared to be heavy trash bags into a dumpster not far from the couple's home. And another bag of trash was found sort of near Brian Walshe's mother's home. Mm-hmm. And in this trash bag contained pretty concerning items, I would say. Considered items such as a hatchet, hammer, shears, a hacksaw, towels, and a protective suit, as well as cleaning agents, a Prada purse, boots like the ones that Ana Walshe was last seen wearing. So
they even did find her COVID vaccination card, right?
Right. So a lot of things that would almost immediately tie these items to Ana in some way or another. And they were able to get DNA evidence from this evidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and that came back to, most of it had Ana's DNA as well as Brian's DNA.
Yeah, I believe, Kenzie, that her DNA was found on the hatchet and the hacksaw and some of the other items, and his DNA was specifically noted to have been found on that protective suit that you mentioned. So it's definitely some red flag items here, and as you said, definitely directly kind of tying her to it. And as a matter of fact, investigators know that she was last seen early January 1st after her and her husband were having a friend over for this kind of New Year's Eve dinner celebration. But he actually didn't contact her employer until January 4th. So a few days later to kind of learn kind of her whereabouts, and, eventually she was reported missing as well.
Right, and investigators, again, like we said, pretty early on sort of set their eyes on Brian. Mm-hmm. Last seen with her, doesn't report her missing for several days, and then these items were found. And I don't even know if at the time when Brian was a major suspect, if they even knew that DNA evidence came back to him. I know that takes a little bit of time to kind of connect evidence, but a man was seen with these trash bags and then these items that were tested. And Jenny, I want to talk about the fact that a hacksaw was one of the items.
I feel like just hearing the items and stuff that were discovered, the fact that, the boots that she was last kind of seen in, her COVID card, and then you have these really, honestly, just the only way I can think to describe is disturbing items that were all found, shears, towels.
I know.
And near his mother's home, too, which was interesting.
Right. Near, not very subtle on anyone's part, I think, if you're trying to make it seem like it's not Brian Walshe.
Yeah.
Or if you're trying to make it seem like it is Brian Walshe, you know, I guess that would be a method of putting it near his family's home. But regardless, pretty early on, they sort of set their eyes on Brian. In fact, he eventually does actually plead guilty to some of the charges. He pleads guilty to some lesser charges in November 2025. But what he pleads guilty to, I also thought was unique because he doesn't plead guilty to anything to do with murder, homicide, disappearance. He pleads guilty to misleading police and illegally disposing of her body.
Yeah, and that was definitely interesting as well because, again, I don't think we mentioned this yet, but he, you know, told investigators that he had last seen his wife when she had been called to D.C. As we said, she was a D.C. area real estate agent. They did live in the Boston area, but she commuted to D.C. a lot for work. And he said,
what a drive,
yeah,
or a flight, or however she was commuting.
Yeah, it's definitely a long ways. But she left to D.C. on New Year's Day for a, quote, work emergency is what he told them. But when they kind of looked into that further, there was no evidence of her like taking a rideshare to the airport or boarding a plane or anything like that to kind of connect that could have been true.
I know. And I also why, this is kind of a random question, but why would she have a job in DC if she lives in Boston? Like, what?
Yeah.
Why having such a far away commute, you know?
It is definitely a long ways, and I believe she worked for a pretty big real estate agent firm in the DC area because I initially thought the same thing. Like, if anybody's ever been to that area from DC, it's definitely a very long drive. I don't know about flight-wise, but it is definitely a long ways to go. So.
Yeah. So investigators continue looking into Brian. And again, like we mentioned, they were able to get some form of confession of illegally disposing of her body, which would inherently suggest what we would all fear, that she's no longer alive. Because how are you going to dispose of a body that's alive?
And during the trial, prosecutors actually really kind of leaned into this digital evidence, actually. So they found these items as well, but they really kind of leaned into their argument that Brian was the one responsible based on evidence they found on devices that were connected to him and the search history there that was pretty bad, including some online searches for, quote, dismemberment and best ways to dispose of a body.
Oh my gosh, Jenny, we could...
Just horrible searches.
I honestly feel like we could do a whole entire episode just of his search history. Because, for those of you guys that are watching this, investigators can see that. And for the most part, when it actually comes to trial, it is considered circumstantial evidence. So it's not really like a one or all or be all type of thing. But in this case, I would almost disagree just because of the amount of search histories. So because they already got them on lesser degree charges, this actually comes back in because that's not good enough for detectives. They don't want to stay on just disposing of a body illegally.
They really
actually
believe that he's
do
responsible.
charge him with murder.
Yeah. And I guess some of the other searches, really just disturbing searches. He apparently looked at an article titled, "Is it possible to clean DNA off of a knife?" Best way to dispose of body parts after murder was another search. And then he also looked up things about cleaning blood with ammonia, bleach, and hydrogen peroxide. So again, Kenzie, it's kind of like, in a lot of cases, the searches are not, the end-all be-all. But this is definitely kind of going back to the items that were found as well with his DNA.
And this is all according to the Associated Press, to AAP. Yes. They did a lot of extensive reporting on the trial, on all of these missing pieces. So that's where we're pulling most of our source material today. But I have also seen reports of, I've seen video clips of detectives talking about some of the search histories and even some of the things that he searched up. I mean, again, it is extensive. I swear he went through every single bullet point, but then near the, I don't know, the 50th mark, that might not be the exact number, but he finally searches up can police track your search history, which is a duh. But then he keeps searching more things after that, and you would think after he searched up that,
which is also another red flag. I mean, the searches in general, right? I mean, why would you be looking those things up? But then you're wondering if police can see it why would you be wondering that if you didn't do anything wrong?
Yeah, well, and then the fact that you keep searching more questions after
Yeah.
that. Like, obviously, you got your answer when you searched up, can police see your search history, and then kept searching more things that were incriminating. But, again, it's all circumstantial evidence, but I just think the preponderance of the amount of information, the amount of search history,
which defense did have a reason for, which I guess we'll get into a little bit more later, but their kind of argument on why he might have been looking those things
So
up.
when they actually pull it into court, when they actually bring into court, one of the things that they look for is a motive. Because sometimes it's random, sometimes, these things just happen, but a big thing to actually convict someone of murder, especially when there's no body, is you have to determine a motive of why they would do such a thing.
Yeah, and they noted quite a few different ones. An insurance executive actually testified that he was her husband. He was the sole beneficiary of a $1 million life insurance policy.
So there's a financial motive,
which
potentially.
Investigators do oftentimes try to see specifically if there's some sort of financial reason. But there was also kind of a personal motive as well that was brought up. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, well, so according to what was presented at court, there was trouble in paradise. There was trouble in the Walshes' marriage, which could also be a little bit foreshadowed by the fact that she is commuting from D.C. I mean, I don't know how, if you're wanting to be away from home that long.
How you can be kind of, it's a quite long distance.
Yeah. But there's also a personal romantic relationship that could be a possible motive. In fact, Ana Walshe was reportedly having an affair.
Yeah, so she was actually reportedly having an affair, and I believe he did testify as well with someone who had actually, I believe, sold her the D.C. townhouse, and his name was William Fastow.
Yes. So he testifies that Ana and them were having an affair. And at multiple points, they weren't really hiding their affair, but they hadn't directly come out and said it. But certain people knew about it, basically, except Brian, reportedly. But they said that Ana was planning to come out and eventually tell Brian. And the two of them discussed.
She thought she should be the one to tell him, right?
The two of them discussed how they would tell Brian, or how she would tell Brian, and go from there. So who knows? She goes missing on New Year's Eve. Maybe she wanted to start with a New Year resolution of coming clean, and
if in some way, when she told him, or if he found out before she was able to, if that could have resulted in her disappearance. But again, Brian's attorney actually denied that he ever knew about it, and he actually declined to testify as well, Brian, in this case.
So when they actually are talking about some of the evidence that is presented in court, we already talked about the search history. Well, they actually are kind of going through now what Brian is saying happened and some of the other evidence that investigators are putting forth.
Yeah, so it was, again, he told them that after she left for her work emergency on the early morning of January 1st, after they had this little get-together, he kind of painted a picture for investigators of what his day was like and what the following days were like. And he told them that he went to buy orange juice and milk at a grocery store, and then visit his mother a little ways away in Swampscott, Massachusetts, which is around 33-mile drive. And then he said he ran errands for her at CVS, brought the groceries back to her home, and then arrived back home. And then he also told investigators that the next day he took his 6-year-old son out to get a chocolate milkshake at a nearby juice bar while a babysitter watched his 2 other kids, because the couple had 3 young children as well.
Yeah, we'll get to that in later on, because this is, I can't even imagine what they're going through.
But investigators, in kind of looking into what he's telling them, he wasn't able to produce receipts kind of placing him at some of the locations that he mentioned. They were able to place him at that juice bar.
Because if he bought things, they would be receipts, and there would be transaction records.
Yeah. But they were able to place him at that juice bar. But something else interesting in this is that, he didn't mention to them, but a surveillance camera placed him at a Home Depot. Actually.
And I'm going to show you the image of this Home Depot surveillance, and just look at some of the items that are in his cart.
Yeah. So as you can see in that picture, he's kind of wearing a COVID mask, which again, this was early 2023. It was more prevalent back then, but also in this case, with them seeing this photo and the items that he's buying, can also be quite
that
suspicious.
looks like a sweeping pan to me, and then some of the buckets. I'm trying to figure out what's on the bottom there, but regardless, the fact that there was,
It looks like he's wearing gloves almost.
Yeah,
as
he
well.
is wearing
surgical gloves.
He is. Yeah, I didn't even notice that, Jenny.
Yeah.
He is wearing like what looks to be appear like blue gloves.
Yeah.
Blue gloves, mask, dark clothing.
Looks like maybe mops in there as well. So some different cleaning sort of items.
Right. And then we also know from earlier that when they were searching, they saw this man, and they found items with a hacksaw that had Anna's blood on it. They found a cleaning suit that had Brian's blood on it. I mean, things are not really looking good for Brian.
Also, those, typical like tool items, places you would buy those would be at like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, things like that. And again, he kind of seemed to have left this part out to investigators that he took a trip there and bought items, but then told them very specifically, oh, I got orange juice from this store. I got milk here. I took my child to get a milkshake.
Yeah. And it looks also like, according to AP, that some of those items that we were having a hard time describing included mops and tarps and drop cloths and cleaning supplies. So kind of an odd time for you to be buying that the day after your wife goes missing. And then I just want to go back to the fact that he already had pleaded guilty in 2025 to disposing of this body illegally.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, his attorney kind of argued that it wasn't a murder, but more so kind of a sudden, unexplained death. And I believe they had people there who kind of testified that that's very rare that something like that can happen medically, because she was young and seemed active and healthy. But his attorney, Brian's attorney, kind of portrayed it that they were like a young, loving couple who had a bright future, and that when he found that she had died, I believe he said that he found that she was dead in their bedroom, that he kind of went into the state of panic. And then that's when he disposed of her body, because I believe the other news outlets, the Associated Press, had reported that he was worried about his children finding her in that state. So his panic was to just get rid of her.
Which I want to pause there, because you panicked, and so instead of calling 911, which is like the universal call in an emergency, you decide to take care of it yourself. And then going back to the search history, I know it's circumstantial evidence, but I can't help it. Going back to the search history, how long after missing to report dead, how to dismember a body, how to dispose of a body.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, you had time to sit there, Google it with this body that's probably with you. You have time to sit there and Google all these questions. So that doesn't sound like you're in a state of panic if you're then going to the store. Or
if you're worried about your children maybe coming in and finding her, but you're Googling all these things.
Yeah.
Like, I can see what you're saying. That definitely takes time. And I think that's like his defense was arguing, well, he was panicking. That explains more of the searches as well. It wasn't because he murdered her, but it's definitely, you wonder if you found a loved one or a partner in a state where they needed medical attention, the first instinct.
Yeah, and Jenny, I know we were talking about this offline, but I almost am curious, what came up. When because he's searching all these things that are pretty graphic, and I'm almost wondering, what comes up. I don't really want to search it, because I don't want to be on, an FBI watch list, but I almost wonder, what happens when you search, how to dismember a body. What is he finding on these things?
Yeah.
I don't know. He sends so many follow-up questions, too, in these search histories that I'm I don't know. I am curious, but I also don't want to even go there as far as what could possibly pop up when you're searching those items.
I feel like I've definitely wondered that before too, because I feel like in some of these I know we've had other cases where the primary suspect has searched up things that are pretty convicting, but you wonder, like, what even comes up. Like, they mentioned an article was titled about DNA on a knife.
Yeah.
Like, that's really, like, what...
Yeah.
Definitely not going to search it, but you wonder for sure. What,
right.
Right.
So kind of going into a little bit more about the motive, because we obviously know that, like, he has all these search histories. He has been seen at Home Depot with cleaning supplies that he conveniently left out to investigators in his account of events. But I want to talk about more about what could potentially be a motive for him, and which is the affair. So you talked about it, but, like, William Fastow told the court on, like, the 4th day of the trial that he met Ana back in 2022 when she sold him a townhouse.
Okay. But did he sell her? That was the other part that I was wondering.
Oh, it does sound like he sold it to her.
But
correct.
It's interesting because I know she also worked in real estate.
Right. So interesting why he would sell her the townhouse.
Yeah.
But maybe that was before she became a DC real estate. I don't know. That's an interesting point, Jenny. But they began to have, like, an intimate relationship. Again, like I mentioned earlier, they weren't really hiding it. They, like, even took a Thanksgiving trip.
Oh, yes.
To Ireland?
I know we were talking about that earlier as well. The fact that, Brian said he didn't know about this affair, and she hadn't, according to testimony, hadn't told him about it yet, or was going to soon at least. But the fact that she went on a trip with him over Thanksgiving, like over the holiday, I guess a way that could kind of explain that to Brian at the time is she was gone a lot for work.
Yeah, especially if she's already flying down to DC.
But yeah, I think it shows that they had, a relationship and knew each other.
Yeah, but Fastow eventually, he does tell the court that, like, his last contact with Ana was a text message from her on New Year's Eve. Well, then a few days later, January 4th, he gets a phone call from Brian asking if, like, first of all, he calls first time. He doesn't answer because he's worried that he found out about the affair and wants to confront him about it.
Lets it go to, like, voicemail, right?
Lets it go to voicemail, correct. And then I think Brian calls again, and he does answer, and that's when Brian sort of asks him, like, hey, do you know where Ana is? Do you have any idea about her whereabouts? Trying to find her. Now, I have questions about this, too, because did he know that this man existed, but that he wasn't, is his claim that, like, he didn't know about the affair?
But that they were maybe friends.
Yeah, but that they were friends. Or did he say he didn't know about this man at all?
Yeah. That's definitely a question, because if he would think to call him, maybe he could have thought, if the argument was that he didn't know, is that, this person also works in DC real estate, they're friends, like, he was our real estate agent before, maybe that's how he kind of portrayed that he had that connection between the two of them. But I did think it was a little bit interesting that he did call a few days after, for sure.
And him, of all people.
Yeah. So I think with all the kind of evidence that was presented and the searches and the DNA placements and kind of him leaving out the Home Depot trip and the testimony, I believe they had testimony from several people, including her Ana's coworkers and friends and things like that. I don't think it was a huge surprise when the court kind of turned out in December that he was found guilty of first-degree murder.
Yeah, so he was found guilty, and then just days later, he was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife, with no possibility of parole.
Yeah.
And kind of a side note that we kind of didn't really touch on, but he was already at that point convicted and supposed to serve sentencing for a fraud case.
Yeah, art fraud.
Yeah, an art fraud case. So they basically determined that he was supposed to serve this in addition to that.
Yeah, and I think that's, just touching on it quickly, something else that they kind of mentioned throughout the hearing is that I believe he was more confined to their home and where they lived in the Boston area because of this other case that was going on with the art fraud, that he had apparently sold 2, like, counterfeit paintings. So this was all kind of happening in the background at the time of the murder trial. But then, as you said, Kenzie, on December 18th of 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison for his wife's murder.
Yes, and I believe the judge ruled in one of the cases with the dismemberment, all that stuff, the judge ended up ruling that he needed to serve these things consecutively, which I thought was interesting because when you have a life sentence, a lot of times they would serve the remainder of your charges concurrently, which means at the same time. But the judge actually ruled that the charges will be served consecutively. So even after his life sentence, he still has those additional years added.
And I think just touching on a little bit about Ana and, you know, who she was as a person. We didn't touch on this yet, but her and Brian actually had 3 young kids, I believe 3 young sons together as well. And I believe according to reporting from AP, they were actually taken into the state's custody as well because of this case. So just an overall really sad situation.
I thought it was interesting because the fact that the kids were taken into state custody when there's a living relative, Brian's mom, but we don't know the full reason of why that wasn't brought to her, but yeah. And Ana was a real estate agent who immigrated from Serbia, excuse me, not suburbia. But she was a woman, and she was a mother of 3 children. She was an immigrant who came here for a better life. She was a working woman.
She was so young.
Yeah, I know.
Only 39 years old, you know. Regardless of whether she had an affair or not, nobody deserves, I think everybody can agree that nobody deserves what happened to her. And she's leaving behind 3 young children who are going to now be without their mom.
Right. So that was a lot for us to cover, but if you guys enjoyed this case, enjoyed hearing about this case, and you want to hear more cases like this, we encourage you to continue watching us on air, online, and for future episodes that air Tuesday at 8 p.m. And we'll see you next time.